Hey guys, how you doing? Coach here. Glad you took a couple of minutes to join me. Hey, and by the way, since I'm coming to you during Turkey Day week, I want to wish you and all of yours a happy, safe, and sane holiday weekend. Hey, for most of us in the northern hemispheres anyway, and for some of you in the southern hemisphere, you know, it's a quiet season. It's that quiet time when you can't, except for you guys down in the deep south or SoCal or Arizona, places like that, you guys can still get out and do some stuff. But for the majority of us, we're kind of done with the landscape season. About the only thing we do now is, hello Buffalo, you know, shovel snow and get through the winter. But if you got a project you're thinking about next year, it's a good time to start visualizing, planning, maybe get in contact with a pro if you're going to enlist the services of, get them on the books and get ready to go, and then exhale, enjoy the holiday season and the new year, and then start looking forward to 2023. Hey, there's one thing that we do not do in the landscape world, especially when it comes to planning and visualizing and getting ready for a project. That's right, we don't do random. Random does not even enter our conscious forethought. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's get going. Hey, when I was putting this episode together, I just went to the dictionary and I looked up the definition of random. Funk and Wagnall definition is, it's kind of like made, done, or happening without any sort of conscious thought. Or it's also unfamiliar or undefined or unspecified. So those are some of the adjectives that describe random. So if you apply those adjectives to a landscape project, does it sound like it fits? Hell no. And let's dive deeper into that, shall we? So some of the comments that I've got on this channel and a lot of comments that I've read on other landscape and gardening type of channels is we should approach landscaping in a more natural, native, and random approach to make things look and use more native flora instead of ornamental flora. And like I have said on other videos and on the podcast as well, you know, when you start engaging native flora into your landscape, that native flora has one thing in mind, two things in mind. One, to survive, based on water, based on predation from herbivores, and also propagation and proliferation. And many times, depending on people's residential sites, that does not always work. And so by randomly placing native flora, you know something? Even the native flora, many of the landscapes I've seen done, it has a method to the madness behind it. And you can generally see it. You know what it's like when you go out into Ma nature and you just walk out into the hills or out into valleys or coastal plains. You can see what native looks like. And many times that is what your residential landscape will turn out to be if you follow that theory of random. Many times that will not work in the way of control, in the way of weekly or monthly maintenance. And I have seen many clients over the years that thought that would be, hey, drought tolerant stuff, coach, that's what we're looking for. And maybe we could find some native plants. And I always said, I'll look into the native side for you. Do you have some plants in mind? And they go, oh no, we don't know anything about that kind of stuff. I said, so how about a front lawn of emerald manzanita? It's native here in Northern California. So how about that? No, we weren't thinking about that. I said, well, how about some Julia Phelps California lilac? Goes about 8 to 10 feet tall. Beautiful blooms in the, well, no, we weren't really kind of thinking about that. I said, well, how about some California toyon? 8 to 10 feet tall, great hedges and screens. Does have a bit of a seed problem, but So many times my design consultations was also turned out to be educational opportunities. And it does not mean that I could not provide what they wanted. They wanted something drought tolerant and they wanted some native stuff. So I could pull from the ornamental horticultural world and still give them, but I didn't give them spreading and rooting grasses, and I did not give them plants that would get way too big, way too tall, and I didn't give them things that wanted to proliferate and take over their yard. And it's something that random just does not enter into. Random, any form of construction, any form of landscape, building, paving, nothing is done with random in mind. And I would really encourage you not to approach any landscape project you do with random in mind. You'll end up with a problem that you're either going to have to redo or rethink months or years down the road. One thing that I do know is that even random, native, even ornamental landscapes that are first installed, they're really hard to make ugly. They're kind of like a brand new baby, you know, and a brand new puppy. You don't have ugly involved in a brand new landscape. You got fresh mulches and brand new plants and a tree here and a tree there, and it looks good. Initially, the first 6 months or honeymoon phase of that new landscape, it always looks good. The true test of any landscape, a well thought out landscape, happens after year 1 and generally between year 3 and 5, where the true design concept of whoever put it together comes to fruition, and you really see what the maturity of that landscape is going to be. Most of the time, a random approach to it ends up with things coming out of the ground. That random theory becomes messy, haphazard, higher maintenance for sure to kind of keep things in bounds, and oftentimes maybe having to pull some things out because they proliferated from the point you put them in the ground, they went to seed, and now they're spreading across the front or backyard, which you did not intend. So random, it has its place, but not always in the landscape. I know one thing as a landscape professional, both as a designer and as a contractor, I never had a single job that I ever approached with random in mind, not even for what the client was talking about when they use that adjective random. I approached each and every job with a specific step-by-step approach, not only in the estimating of what the job was going to cost, but also the demolition and construction phases and eventual completion phases of every single job. And the reason I did that is because it allowed me to work in the most efficient fashion, and I knew where I had to start, and I knew where the finish line was on every single job. And if you take this random approach to it, that's where a lot of DIYers get a little bit twisted, and they end up getting demolition halfway done, and then they start in on irrigation, and then they're starting on irrigation, but they realize they forgot about drainage, and then they're going out and buying plants and putting a tree in, and the rest of the plants go over in the side yard, and it's very, very disjointed. So think about it. That's why I always offer that step-by-step on the website, so you know where to start and where to finish. It doesn't cost you nothing. Go there and get it. If you don't even have a project, but maybe there's something thinking maybe later next year or 2024, it's really nice to have that where you can read it and listen about it and really increase that landscape knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? Can you imagine the house you live in? Did somebody end up building that thing in a random manner? I hope not, but you know, maybe. But a random approach to a building starts by grading. It starts by underground utilities. It starts with foundation. It starts with mud sills, and it goes up from there, and things that are square, and you know, it goes on and on. The driveway that you have, you know, an estimate, an accurate estimate of how much concrete, how much reinforcing wire, the sidewalks, the sewer systems of the cities, everything, nothing is ever approached from a random direction. If you did, chances are it would never pass code, and you'd be very unhappy with it. So does that mean that random is wrong? In the construction phase, the planning phase, the design phase, I say resoundingly, yes, it is. So where does random enter into it? Well, how about after you get the landscape all done and you've created yourself a vegetable garden? And in that vegetable garden, you said, I'm gonna have carrots, squash, tomatoes, sweet peas on a vine, etc. Okay, how about a random selection of tomato varieties? Maybe you want sweet 100s. Maybe you want a beefsteak and an ace and a celebrity. And okay, now you can go into random and experiment. But you have a wonderfully well thought out vegetable area that has drip irrigation, automation, and space. Now random can enter into it, just not in the construction phase. And it does not mean that some of the professionals in the landscape design and construction world don't think about random. I can remember distinctly a particular job that I was invited to bid on back in the early part of the last decade. And when I was bidding it, I noticed some of the plant selections. Now let me make this story clear. The landscape architect was a friend of mine, and a good friend at the time. And when he drew this thing up, and I got the plans from the client, and I was looking at it, after I'd seen the site, I questioned some of the plant selection and some of the placement. Classic example was the designer or the architect wanted an Austrian pine in front of the living room picture window, which faced out onto the street. Now, an Austrian pine is nice for the first 10 years. And then that thing gets pretty good size, like 40 feet wide, 60 feet tall. And it was placed within 8 feet of that front living room window. And then there was some other shrubbery that was over on the side that would probably have gotten way too big. So I estimated the job with a couple other alternatives to pose to the client. And I presented the estimate. And she was okay with it, but I took that moment to say, is this what John Doe Architect wanted to put here? Did you want an Austrian pine in front of the living room window? And she goes, well, yeah, but what's wrong with an Austrian pine? I think they're kind of pretty pines. I said, they are, but this thing is going to be in the place it was going to be. It probably wouldn't reach 60 by 40. It would probably be more like 40 feet tall and 30 feet wide. And I said, the mature size of this is going to be really problematic. But if that's what you want me to put there, and she goes, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that John Doe Architect put that there knowing? I said, I don't know. I'm asking. I'm not saying anything is wrong. There's just a couple of plant questions that I have. And before I start the job and put that in, and years down the road, you're cursing me a blue streak, I just want to make sure. She goes, no, I wanted a pine in the design, but I want one that is, containable. And I said, well, this one right here at that location of the front yard is going to take over the whole front yard. And chances are it will be powerful enough to lift sidewalks leading to the front door and potentially house foundation many decades down the road. She goes, oh, find me another one, find me another one. And I said, well, what about these plants over here on the side? Well, I just wanted kind of a green fence between me and my neighbor. Well, what was selected, dwarf Carolina cherry, was like 10 feet tall and 6 feet wide. And I told her you would have to end up hedging it, probably 4 or 5 times a year. She goes, I don't have time for that. What was John Doe thinking? I'm going, hey, there was a discussion. He came up with some ideas. I'm just making some, options for you so that you can get the same result, but not this random plant application that we have here that's going to make you unhappy in about a decade. She says, well, I'm calling that architect up and he can redraw this thing. I said, the layout is okay. It's just some of the plant selection. It's kind of random for the size that we're dealing with. But you can see where I was going. I didn't want to insult. I didn't want to ruin a friendship, but I still wanted a job. And she was very happy at the end. We did very good business together. Had a beautiful back and front yard when we were all said and done. And we had plants that worked a little better. One thing I want to emphasize in this episode, and that is that landscape construction is construction, just like any other construction venue, just like framing, just like plumbing, just like electrical. It is not approached in a random manner. So think about it. If you approached, say you needed to install an irrigation system for supplemental water in the hot summer months. If you approached it with, well, I'm just going to put a couple of impact heads in the corner by the fences and maybe one over here, and then just turn them on and let them water everything. Just water everything, including those tomatoes, those random selections you made in the vegetable garden. Well, number one, tomatoes don't like overhead watering. And number two, you are going to kind of run out of functionality after a few years when things start to grow up. So a random approach to an irrigation layout is foolish and a waste of money, and is going to call for a redo inside 5 years. Same thing with drainage. If you just dig a trench of whatever, throw your corrugated drain tubing in it and call it good, did you check for slope? Did you check for the amount of water that's coming off the roof? Which downspout carries the most water load, and how are you dealing with that? Random does not apply to drainage systems. If you look at lighting system, a random approach of putting too many lights on a smaller cable and how the last two lights are really, really dim like they've been put on a rheostat, random approach doesn't work there. You know, the amount of concrete you need to order for the back patio, the amount of reinforcing wire, how many forms, random does not enter into it. So you can see that if you take a more well thought out approach, and we're at the time and part of the year for the next 3 to 4 months where you can take your time and really think it out and do some education on it, your project that you're considering is going to be so much easier to do. So much more confidence is going to be gained before you ever put a shovel in the ground. So as a DIYer, take a page out of the professional landscape contractor's book. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say any of the contractors worth their salt that have any modicum of education behind them, any modicum of experience, never approach a job in a random manner. And if they do, those are the ones that you like to shake their hand and say thank you for your time and send them on down the road. You want someone who can explain to you what day 1 is going to be like, as well as day 10 or day 45. Every single day there should be something of progression in the job every single time. And if you do it yourself, approach it in the same way. Whiteboard it like I taught you a few weeks ago, and be able to say when you get done, I got this much done today, and tomorrow is going to be 5 more, and they're already written out. So that is not a random approach to each day, each punch list, and you know that you're going down that step-by-step process so that at the end, your DIY project looks like a pro did it. One of the last things I want to cover, and that's your budget. You know, if you approach a landscape project, say you're going to rip out the whole front yard and put a new one in next spring. If you do it from an approach of, I think we can get this done for X number of dollars, what you're going to want is you're going to make sure that you have a set budget. Maybe you're going to have a $7,000 budget to put into your new front yard. And as a result of that $7,000, now what can you go out and get for that $7,000? The next 3 to 4 months, you will know. And you'll know that you have it highly underpriced or way overpriced, depending on the breadth of the project you want to do. So the education and the knowledge is going to be power, so you know exactly, hey, I know what I want to do. This is what I want to do with the front yard. This is what I've designed out, and it's going to cost, if I stay on budget and I don't find any weirdness, it's going to cost me $7,500. I mean, you know exactly how much to borrow or save for or take out a second or however you plan on paying for it. But isn't that a lot more powerful than going into it going, man, I sure hope I have enough money for this. I think I have enough money. Oh man, I got to go get some more of these. That's really going to stress the budget. Nah, you'll know ahead of time. I would have hated going into a 5-figure project, not knowing exactly how many dollars are going where in my project, so that I know at the end, at least I can walk away with a profit that justified all the hours and days that I put into it and still appealed to the client as far as a price point. So do the same thing, and your results and your knowledge base is going to be far and away above any of the other DIYers out there in the world. I have been called to many a home where I have been greeted by the couple that have been absolutely gobsmacked in the face as far as what they thought landscaping cost is versus what they found out how much it's going to be. So make sure that as you're approaching your project, you know that ahead of time and you can get it done correctly, under budget and on time. You know, from the planting, scheme, design and layout to your irrigation, lighting, flat work, fencing, whatever it might be, I hope this sheds a little light on what to avoid when you take on a landscape project yourself. Avoid that random thought process and make sure that you consult with professionals. You can always email me if you have a question, youryardcoach@gmail.com. Hey, and don't forget the book and the course. My gosh, you know, for a very small modicum of investment, you can end up with a damn near an AA in landscape design and construction. So that's what I have for you this week. Let random be somewhere else, but not in your project. I hope you got a little bit out of this. If you do, hey, there's always a super thanks, and you can buy Coach a cup of joe if you'd like. I'll catch you guys next week. I hope you have, if you're watching this during Turkey Week, that you have a safe and sane. Don't forget Black Friday madness. Be careful out there. As always, to your landscape success, I'll catch up with you next Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.